Good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Thank you
It's
so much
lovely
for
to
having me.
meet you.
Likewise, likewise.
So, do you want to just introduce yourself and, yeah, what it is that you guys, where you're from, basically, and
Okay, cool. So my name is Lou. I am one of the educators and content creators at Team GAO. So GAO is for Girls Against Depression. We're a team of 7, and our main focus is just doing general intersectional education on human rights and mobilization. We do have like areas that we focus on a bit more. So, for example, the femicide that's going on in South Africa and the gender-based violence situation in South Africa, a lot of race education, a lot of education on rape culture and that sort of thing.
yeah, yeah. Great. So, yeah, for those guys who just joined, this is Nikki from T-Shirts for Change, and we're chatting to Lou from Girls Against Depression. And we're just going to chat about what it is that you guys do, and Women's Month in South Africa, and anything else basically that comes up in the chats. I wanted to ask you, can you tell us a bit about, or a little bit more about Girls Against Depression? We love your page. We find it so informative, and yeah, we'd love to know more about what's your mission, what's your vision, and we know you do some amazing things. So could you tell us more about that?
Thank you so much, first of all. We are really proud of our page, even though it's a lot of work. We really do love what we do. So our
Yeah.
founder is Iona. If you follow us or if you go to our page, you will see Iona all over it. And she started the page, like last year, 2020, probably around this time last year, when like social justice and social media like was beginning to trend. So she had started it around then. And even though she lives like overseas, Iona is South African. And she realized that there was a need for organizations and social media to speak on South African issues, or at least to be South African based, so that those who are here would be able to have a voice. Because even when it comes to things like international issues, South African voices are very much drowned out. Even though there are people speaking on them, I think the South African perspective is like a lot of the time is facing some form of erasure. So she changed the focus of like just speaking on generalized issues to doing it from a South African and an Africanized perspective on just general education and human rights. I would say we have lots of aims as an organization,
Yeah.
but I think if I had to like blanket all of them into like one sort of easy sentence, it would be to like help people see the need for equality through equity. We're very big on, as we said, intersectional education. So helping people understand social positioning, but like not just for the sake of understanding that there's differences between each other. It's understanding that these differences between people don't have to be a limiting factor. They don't, these discriminatory oppressions that people face don't need to be an obstacle. And we can use them as an advantage to better our society. We choose to do that through education. We do, as you've seen, like also do like a lot of mobilization and fundraising, and connecting people with organizations is a really big thing we do, particularly connecting with gender marginalized folk with like crisis centers and that sort of thing. So we really do actually, now I think about it, put our hand in everything. But we really just want to be a helping hand, like wherever we can be a helping hand, if that makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of need, and there's need everywhere. Whether it's education, whether it's raising funds, whether it's mobilization, or whether it's just literally informing people what's going on, so that they know that they also need to like go do research and what's going on, keeping people up to date. We really just want to make the world an equal place, but we recognize we can't reach equality without going through equitable means and showing people the disparities that exist and helping people understand these disparities in order to like move forward to get rid of them, you know?
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. I think you guys do kind of like whatever's relevant at the time, that's in that space, you expand on it and provide more insights onto the matter. And so we can kind of visit your page at any time and see like what it is we should be paying attention to at that particular time, or in general, like continuously. And I really do love the South African voice aspect of that, because and African, because it's so important. Like, I think the circumstances are so different, that, yeah, it's something that needs to
For
be,
sure.
we need to try and act on it.
I think there's this idea that Africans in general, it just happens that so many of us on the page are anchored in South Africa. But I think there's this idea that Africans in general don't have a conceptualization of what goes on in the world, that we're not global key players, that we don't contribute to like just the world like functioning on like a global level, which is completely false. It's completely false. It's just, even when we do have platforms, they tend to be co-opted or just drowned out. And so it's really important for us, even though we do a lot of international things, a lot of focusing on general education and education and diaspora, standing in solidarity with people. It's really important for us, I think, as a unit to show that Africans ourselves, we're game changers too, you know what I mean? We're educators too, we're move makers as well. We have voices that need to be heard because we have a lot to give, and the perspective that we have here is so unique. But I just think it'd be unfortunate if there weren't platforms that didn't advocate for like African and in turn South African voices, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. I saw that you guys are doing a GoFundMe at the moment for raising funds to feed South African families. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. So it's not just that. I mean, I'm sure everyone who's watching this is aware of what happened in South Africa and what has been happening over the past few weeks. If not, you can go to our page and we have quite a few posts explaining what happened.
Yes.
But I think for many people, after the riots ended, there was this idea that, oh, they're done, everything's going to go back to normal. But that's not the case. It's proven and was seen during the riots that gender-based violence cases increased. People's businesses were affected. I mean, there's already been insecurity that was a large factor that played into the riots in the first place. There's a lot of things at hand that need to be handled in order for us to help rebuild South Africa. So we have pledged to use all the proceeds for the fundraiser to help small businesses through the Future Females Fund. They're doing because one thing that's beautiful about South Africa is how innovative and entrepreneurial this place is. I mean, there's a lot of business owners here, and a lot of the businesses that were affected, I mean, they saved up like 10 years to have tools to do their trade, and then they were destroyed. So we're contributing to them. Rape Crisis, a beautiful, beautiful organization that has been helping victims of gender-based violence since before the idea of a femicide was even trending on social media.
Yeah,
so it's really important that we're doing a fundraiser because it's long-term effects, and I think people don't realize that. A lot of people have just stopped talking about the riots. They're not in the news anymore. So I think people have this idea that everything's Gucci, everything's fine, and that's not the case. There are people who are still picking up the pieces of their businesses, of their livelihoods, those who were injured. There's a lot of bystanders who were injured as well. There's a lot going on, people who have been displaced and that sort of thing, because buildings are being burned. And so it's important that I think those people understand that there are people willing to fight for them and be able to have access to the resources to help them rebuild their lives. And if it's not even just rebuilding, helping them start, I mean, we're going to use the funds to do that too. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. So anyone who doesn't know, you can head to Girls Against Oppression page and donate to the GoFundMe.
Yeah, the link's in our bio for the GoFundMe.
Yeah.
And we're also accepting donations through our PayPal. If you look on the posts that talk about the fundraiser, you'll see our PayPal on there, but our PayPal is againstoppressiongirls@gmail.com. And just add a note that says riot relief, and that will also go to the fund. Yeah.
That's so great. Thank you so much for doing that and jumping onto that issue.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to chat about Women's Month, which is in South Africa this month. Women's Day is on the 9th. And I wanted to find out, like, what is your thought on what Women's Day should mean to South Africans in particular, and what is the meaning behind it, I guess, for us?
Okay. For our international followers who don't know, August in South Africa is Women's Month. I think a lot of people who don't understand the true meaning behind Women's Month and what actually happened on the 9th of women coming together to fight for their rights. I think Women's Month is just a nice time to celebrate women and give them discounts on things and put purple and pink balloons in stores and that sort of thing. but it holds great significance. It shows that despite the socio-cultural barriers at that time, women of all demographics were willing to come together to fight for their rights. You know what I mean? It's it's really unprecedented in South Africa's history at that point in time to see so many women across demographics, across race, across social class, across ethnicities, across cultures, to come together and stand as a unit. And particularly with the situation that we have here in South Africa with the gender-based violence crisis, during Women's Month, I think it's important to recognize the power that women hold, because despite whether it's legal obstacles, cultural obstacles, social obstacles, like glass ceiling, to being forced to be subject to the femicide, to being forced to be male gaze, rape culture, and that sort of thing, time and time again, women prevail. Literally, time and time again, women prevail. There are doctors, there are educators, there are activists, they are our builders, our architects, our innovators, our media, you know what I mean, or we're creators. Time and time again, women don't fail to prevail. And so one thing that's really important to me that I don't think people sincerely celebrate enough during Women's Month is how powerful women just are, despite everything we have been and are still subject to. There's often this idea that, oh yes, I love my mom, or I love my sister, or I love my girlfriend, celebrate her. But it really is so much more. And on top of that, women traditionally, especially in our cultural context in South Africa, women traditionally do not just fight for themselves. Think of any social movement, and women are always on the front lines. And it's thankless work for women, and they're rarely given gratitude for that sort of work. I mean, even if you think of the liberation movement here in South Africa, women were always on the front lines, but women are so rarely mentioned. And it's not even that they care about being mentioned, you know what I mean? They don't even care about being credited. And a lot of the women who are out there fighting, no, they won't ever get credit for it, but they work and they provide, they work, they shelter, they protect, they advocate for. Women are just so, so powerful. And I think Women's Month really needs to not move past this idea of just celebrating and actually also standing in solidarity with women and their issues. I mean, I've mentioned it so many times already during the live, just about the femicide. I mean, yes, the queer side as well. So just the gender-based violence crisis in South Africa against marginalized bodies, but even then, gender inequality in South Africa hasn't completely been erased. You know what I mean? No. It's still very prevalent here. And it's one thing for men, particularly in South Africa, to just be like, gents, let's do better, or gents, look at our women, or gents, let's support our women. And then their support ends there, you know what I mean? Need to be proactive in helping with women's issues, like holding the government accountable, lobbying, actually keeping up to date on what's going on. Because I think a lot of men in South Africa are completely clueless as to how bad the situation is, simply because they have no idea what's going on. Like, you can name current cases for them and they won't be able to tell you, like, the left from their right on them. Supporting women, I think listening to women is a big thing that isn't really as prevalent as it should be when it comes to women's issues. I mean, I've been to so many rallies during Women's Month over the years where women will talk about their issues, and then a man will just take the mic and just take up airtime and just be speaking about how gents should do better, but they never say how or what it is that gents must be doing better, and they don't know what they should be doing better because they're speaking over women as opposed to listening to them. You're not going to know what to do unless you listen to women. So I think, I mean, particularly this year and like moving forward with everything that's happened since like 2019, it's just been an escalation and escalation and escalation. Yes. I don't even think it's that the rates have been spiking so much as people are not scared to publicly talk about these issues anymore. I think there needs to be a move to not just saying you stand in solidarity with women, but actively standing in solidarity with women, actually listening to them so we can work on women's issues. Because as much as Women's Month is a celebration, and it is a celebration, I'm not taking away from that, I think it's also the perfect time to underpin how deep some of the issues women in this country face are. Yeah. And if you're going to spotlight women for an entire month, you might as well spotlight their voices whilst you're at it. if that makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I think I think men hearing women out. I mean, as you said, like, I mean, women's rights are just, the list just goes on and on and on. But I mean, where would men start with hearing women out? I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is like believing victims, which in South Africa is just like not great at all.
It's almost as if when a victim comes forward, a lot of the time, instead of just validating what they're saying, it's like you have to rule out all other possibilities.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
what were you wearing? Are you sure they meant it like that? Why were you there? What did they say to you? Well, if you hadn't been there, are you sure he meant it that way? He was just trying to be nice. Like, don't take things out of proportion. There's like 15 odd things that could have been the case before you want to believe a victim. And honestly, I don't know another word to use to describe it, but I think that attitude is kind of, no, not kind of, it is disgusting.
Yeah.
To just completely invalidate victims, for sure.
Yeah. I think that like listening to women, it spills over into everything really. Like, I mean, also in the corporate world, like women don't get heard out. In I guess in abusive relationships, they don't get heard out. They get kind of squashed down. It just spills over into everything really. Like even like rape culture, and like if you go out and you can't turn down a man if he tries to hit on you or ask you for your number. It's almost like your voice is not valid if you're just like, no thanks, you know.
For sure. For me, it goes back to that very patriarchal idea that women aren't fully capable of handling themselves, and that they need to be dependent on a male counterpart. I mean, we talk a lot about that, but even if we take it to like simple things now, like you talked about being hit on as if it's meant to be a compliment, or as if they need that validation from being catcalled in order to fully achieve their femininity, or if they report, are you sure that's what happened, or an abusive relationship, maybe you're just overly emotional. It really, the fact that in corporate world, that's another example, a really good example that you just brought up now. If a woman's at the table and brings up an idea, second guessing them as if they're not qualified to have the job that you have hired them for. Like, what? It really just goes back to the idea that patriarchy doesn't deem women to be as capable as men are, and that's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So if for this Women's Month, I mean, I know the issues are just endless, but if you could highlight the most pressing issues that we should be focusing on, should be paying attention to this month and after this month, like just what would those issues for you be?
There's so many, so I wouldn't say the two that I'm about to mention are like the most important two or the only two, but the two that come to mind. The first one I would say amongst women is showing sincere understanding and support for each other. I think often in the community of women, there's this idea that we all have the same social standing, but the fact of the matter is we don't. Now, that doesn't change the fact that we're all women and we're all subject to patriarchal change and that sort of thing. But it does mean that there's certain women who have access to certain things or will not be subject to certain forms of discrimination. And I think when you tell one woman, oh, you have a little bit more privilege than me, and I'm going to need your help, like, navigating this world and these social spaces, they can think, like, no, I don't. Like, I can't believe you're saying that you're being so divisive. Like, it's not. And I think that's a large problem with fixing women's issues in South Africa, because the fact of the matter is when we're fixing women's issues that we all face, we have to move together as a unit. But part of moving together as a unit is understanding how different things will affect us differently, right? And so that's one issue I think within the community that is women that we should definitely discuss. And then I think one thing that I would like to see focused on during Women's Month is holding our governing bodies accountable to addressing the I've seen someone make several speeches this year, hey, where he gives gender-based violence a shout out. Even last year, they made that a force. Recently, they voted in that new bill, and nothing's going on, really. And the idea that they can sit there and be like, yeah, no, we need to protect our women, da 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 da. First of all, we're not even yours. We're just women of this country. Why do you only want to protect us if we're yours? So stop calling us our women. Say you need to protect the women of this country. That's your job. That's what you've been elected to do. You know what I mean? We're all stand under the same flag. Why is it that I'm not granted the same protections as others? You know what I mean? And then you have the audacity to come onto TV or speak to the newspaper, do these official government addresses, saying that you're going to take steps A, B, C, D, and you never even get past step A. I find it incredibly disrespectful to all the people who fall into gender-based violence, may they rest in power, all the people who are currently in gender-based violence crises, that they come and they constantly say they're going to do something and then they do nothing productive. And I mean, it doesn't just stop at them making the announcement. That's essentially appeasement, really. People are dying. People are genuinely dying at alarming rates because of gender-based violence. And you're saying you're going to do something about it, and then you don't do anything about it. Rather, just keep silent then. If you're going to say you're going to do something about it, it's high time that as a society, as South Africans, we look to our government and say, then flip and do it.
Yeah.
Do it. You've been saying you're going to do it. And I don't think there's enough following up on government towards you, especially the way the crisis.
They did say they were going to take on femicide. They were like, we're going to have an action plan for femicide. And now that you mention it, I'm not sure what they've done.
You can go to the government website and read the whole plan. It's there. And I think one of the things that irked me about the plan they posted on the government website is they acknowledged that so much of the burden of fighting with femicide has been placed on NGOs and NPOs and grassroots women. Now, these aren't government-funded organizations. I mean, these are just women and activists who came together, and a lot of it is unfunded work, who said we need to do something about it. And the government openly admitted that, yeah, no, the burden of solving this dire crisis our country is in is falling on unpaid people who don't get funding for their work, so they can't do it as efficiently as they can. We need to learn to hold our government accountable. And it's not just about, you know, watching the speeches and complaining, lobbying, putting pressure on them to actually actively do these things. I mean, there was one police force made to target gender-based violence. How many problems do we have in South Africa? Like, they're not serious. They're not serious.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I definitely agree with that. It starts at a governmental level, and we do need to be putting pressure on our government for more action, for sure. I love that message for this month. I also wanted to expand more on intersectionalism. When I first discovered that feminism had two branches, basically feminism and then intersectional feminism, I was like shocked. I was like, I don't understand how you could advocate for a group of women but only have a certain societal standing, and then disregard another group of women based on their circumstances or so I don't know, what is intersectional feminism, and how do we include, everyone into our feminism advocacy?
So intersectional feminism, the best way I can describe it is the understanding that people can face multiple oppressions at the same time, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be advocated for. So for example, I'm not black and then a woman. I'm a black woman at the same time. So I face racial oppressions and patriarchal oppressions at the same time. Yes. That will put me at a different social positioning than a white woman, because a white woman will have the benefits racially, but they're still facing patriarchy. It doesn't reduce that. And I think there's this idea in people's minds that intersectional is additive, so it's almost like Legos that you can put together. So a white man is here, and then a white woman's here, and then a black woman's here, and then, but that's not the case. in terms of identity, we can be multiple identities at the same time. And even then, those identities affect people to different degrees in so many different ways. I mean, at least I'm in South Africa, so I'm queer as well. I can openly be queer, you know what I mean? But imagine if I was in a country where it was illegal. So now I'm Black, a woman, and I'm queer. Now let's say I am a religion that the country doesn't practice, you know what I mean? It doesn't change. I think what people forget about intersectionality is acknowledging that you have privileges in some areas and oppressions in other areas doesn't change the fact that you have privilege, and it doesn't take away from the fact that you face discrimination.
Yeah.
The purpose of intersectionality is navigating these intersections, essentially, in order to reach an equality that is sustainable and equitable. Because, for example, hypothetically speaking, let's say we erase all the sexism. I'm still Black. You know what I mean? I'm still Black. It hasn't changed. And I still need to deal with that. And even then, for example, being a Black woman within the Black community comes with things like misogyny, and then we have to deal with things like colorism and that sort of thing. Intersectionality aims to holistically address these issues. I think there's this idea that you can often compartmentalize how people face discrimination, and that's not the case. And as you brought up when you first asked the question, there are people who will claim to be feminists and then only advocate for women who look and believe in what they believe in, and that's not feminism. I know the entire GAO team believes this exact same statement I'm about to say, because it's something we've discussed time and time again. We believe the only true form of feminism is a feminism that's intersectional. Because feminism, I mean, there's more complex definitions, but if I were to give a basic definition, one of the fundamentals of feminism is to advocate for everybody, for all genders, regardless of what demographic they belong to. So now we're only advocating, for example, cisgendered women. Everyone else.
And I think if you bring the LGBT into it as well, it adds even more, because then you get women that's like transgender women, and I think that's sometimes also where the intersectionality, where people split up on that, and why intersectionality not only in feminism but in like human rights in general is so important. Is like, so you can even bring in the LGBT under that too.
Exactly. And I think with feminism, intersectional feminism in this country, it's so important. So if you're going to use feminist lens, it has to be intersectional. Particularly if you look at the history of South Africa, and it's not like other African states those who were descendants of those who were colonized and settlers and that sort of thing left. The South African, just racially and ethnically, we are so diverse. We are just honestly a fruit salad of different cultures, and we all occupy the same nation, and we all have to live with each other. And these issues do hurt us to different degrees. And the only way to actually solve these oppressions and inequalities is understanding everybody's different positionings, understanding what that means for people at different positionings, so then we can move forward to solve these positions and how they affect people to different degrees, you know what I mean? Only advocating for yourself is also discriminatory, and I don't know why that doesn't register in people's minds. So for example, let's say I have a feminism that only advocates for straight women. By deciding that only straight women who are equal, worthy of equality and that sort of thing, I've literally marginalized every other type of women. Like, for me, I mean, I think because my feminism has, generally speaking, always been intersectional, it's just common sense that if you're going to have such a strong lens on social justice issues, you would want equality for everybody. Especially
it does seem like common sense to me too.
Especially as women, where we've been so systematically discriminated against, and then even when it wasn't legally possible anymore, people worked their way around that to still, you know, sexism and rape culture. You would think you would not want anybody else to be subject to a discriminatory lens, so you wouldn't choose such an exclusionary way to go about things. But apparently not, because there's so many people who are against the concept of intersectionality. makes no sense. You really
It
just have
doesn't. I saw on your story yesterday that woman who messaged you about men, like, yeah, about not all men basically, and then saying,
yeah.
well, I'm a woman, so don't
And it's
say
like,
the same
okay, babe,
thing men.
I love that for you. And like the amazing thing for me is a lot of the people who have issues, what we say, especially when we speak on women's issues, have issues with us using intersectional feminism. In order to discredit, or try to discredit what we're saying, they have to inject subtext for that first. They have to say a statement that we didn't say to try to discredit us. So we'll say, for example, our last post, real men do rape and hold them accountable. Yeah, but not all men rape. I want you to point out in the post where I said all men rape. Do that for me. And usually, like when I reply, and I'm like, okay, just point it out. Point it out, because we actually have a highlight on our page for times where we say we were wrong or we might have like been given incorrect information. We have a highlight and we put them all there, and we haven't added to it in a while. And just point it out for me. I'm always ready to apologize if I'm wrong.
Yes,
Point it
yes,
out
I
for me.
love that.
They're never able to.
Never able to.
You know what? I understand these conversations are uncomfortable. Don't get me wrong. I can
Yes.
understand how it can be uncomfortable to be told that you're from a demographic that benefits from someone else's oppression. I can understand how, if you're a man, it's hard to hear that the benefits you get from patriarchy suppress women. But it doesn't change the fact that it does. So rather acknowledge it so you can break it down with us. Or when we'll talk about femicide statistics, they'll be like, yeah, but women also assault and men also get raped, so what's your point? And it's like, we never said they didn't.
Yeah.
And like also with the latter argument, because we've got a lot of that on our last post, men also get assaulted. Yes, they do. And we have advocated against male sexual assault. Do you? It's the only time you care about these male victims who've experienced a very real and traumatic experience is to silence women because you don't like the feminazis. You're being disrespectful to that person's trauma. They've gone through something that really changed them, that was a violation of their body, and you don't even care about helping them get justice. You're just bringing it up because you don't like it when women speak. Be different if you're helping that man get justice.
You're using their trauma actually as
Literally.
an argument to prove
To push your narrative that is wrong at that.
Yeah.
At least if your narrative was right, your narrative is harmful and your narrative is wrong, and now you're using a trauma that isn't even yours to tell me to shut up. No, I won't, sir. And it's disgusting that you do that too. And as you said, it's really disappointing when women do it as well, because I think there's this idea that feminists think that all women are feminists. And I've never met a feminist who holds that ideal. I know there's a lot of internal misogyny and sexism that women have to deal with. If you're raised your whole life to under the guise of rape culture, and if you're raised, I mean, it's normalized in our society, really. I can understand you defending tooth and nail, but unfortunately, that's not the way it works. So I'm going to keep speaking, and I'm going to keep correcting people, and I'm going to keep pointing out what was wrong until everybody is safe. I love it for you that all the men in your life have been great towards you and you've never been assaulted. And but that's not the same to the 97%. It's really not. I mean, in this country, it's 1 in 3 women.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
That's a lot of women.
Yeah, I think all of us have a story, you know, of something that's happened to us, and probably it's 3 in 3 women, but the other 2 just haven't yet accepted that what happened to them was abuse.
And I think a lot of people, because of how normalized it is, like even so, in addition to my work with Girls Against Depression, I'm also a volunteer for SA Women Fight Back, which is an NPO that looks specifically at the GBV crisis. A lot of the people I've worked with don't even know that they've been victims of sexual assault.
1000%, yeah.
They know it made them uncomfortable. They know they didn't like it, but it's normalized around them as to how that sexual exchanges should happen, even though they weren't consenting. So they don't even know. They're completely Oblivious. And the government and themselves have time and time again said, no, the stats are definitely underreported, cases are definitely
Yeah.
underreported. And even the statistics they released were so high. They were
I know.
so
I
high.
know. It's like, okay, 1 in 3, but even that's too, like, even that's
I
less than
said,
what
even, I
less
said,
than what it
even,
actually is.
it's
It's just
absolutely,
like shit.
yeah, literally, it's like you've got to be fucking joking me.
I
You've
know.
got to be, you don't think this is an issue when they've already said, yeah, no, the stats are like super, super high, but they're actually probably higher. And this is the government telling you that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I think something that you mentioned earlier about men like finding it hard to hear things like all men rape or other terms like that. But at the same time, I feel like them finding it hard to hear is also rooted in misogyny because like I'm a white woman and I don't find it hard to hear that black women are more oppressed than I am. Like I don't, I find it hard to hear, but I'm not offended by it. Like I'm not like, oh well, you know. So I think
it's,
that attitude, it's the like the small ego attitude of like,
that's
that makes
definitely
it
a
hard for
large
them to hear.
factor. Men aren't used to being told they're being wrong because of being a man, and that's just
Yeah.
that. Sure, they might be facing racial oppressions or oppressions because of their sexuality, but it's not because of their masculinity. Men aren't used to being corrected on the basis of being a man. Men aren't used to being excluded from spaces on the basis of being a man because most social spaces that we operate in were created by men. And so there's been this precedent almost set that by default, the male opinion is going to be
By
correct. Men
default,
are
yeah.
never taught to be quiet because of being men. Like, it's not something that I think as a society, and I mean, obviously we're not doing pockets, but those are almost always feminist spaces. But as a society, they've not just been told to be quiet because of being men, because boys will be boys, right? And so now that there's all these conversations happening where it's like, actually, no, boys mustn't just be boys. Like, they need to be accountable. Sometimes the boys must be quiet, actually. Sometimes the boys mustn't just do anything. They're upset because they don't understand that. It doesn't compete with them because for so long, they've just been allowed, so many men have just been allowed to run amok.
Yeah.
They really have. And they think it's their right to be allowed to run amok. Not just because men have been running amok and then other men have been validating that. Women too. Other gender folk have been doing it as well. We've been allowing them to run amok. I mean, we teach our daughters to cover their legs. We teach our daughters that when their uncle's coming over, they misbehave a certain way. Instead of checking the uncle for the way they're behaving, we have allowed them and we have created spaces where they think it's okay and that this is the way to behave and that there's nothing wrong with their behavior. And a lot of men that I speak to, they're like, well, I've always done this and it hasn't been a problem until now. No, it was always a problem. No one wanted to tell you that.
Oh, yes. Wow, I love the way you word that. Like, it's always been a problem. It's just that we're only in a place now to actually say that it's been a problem.
Right? And like even then, there's a lot of women who aren't feminists because it's not even that they're completely fine with the way society was. That's the way things have always been done for them. So they don't see a pressing need to change it. I mean, breaking generational bonds, you know what I mean? They don't see a need. Like I can tell you there's people in my family have a lot of aunts who are like, oh no, I see you're doing this feminism thing for a career. What? It doesn't make sense. And I'm like, no, yes, I am. And it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense if you just listen. And like you were saying, a lot of it is rooted in misogyny. A lot of it's rooted in the idea that patriarchy is okay. And I think one thing when you use words like misogyny and patriarchy, especially with men and those who uphold like the patriarchy and that sort of thing, they have an issue with the wording of it, right? Because for them, patriarchy is a very strong and negative word.
It's a very strong word, yeah.
But that's what it is. Call a spade a spade.
Yeah, no, that's what it is, yeah. Yeah. So I think maybe like if men do see this, if any men are watching or if any men do watch this, the message to them would probably be like to listen to women and to really hear and not, I guess, not try to fight the message. Maybe just sit with it and think about it rather than fighting it. And it comes back to what you said in the beginning, like just to hear our voices, just to say this is how we feel. Like,
for sure, because you've just brought up, I think, two ways it manifests with men when they listen to like feminist issues and women's issues. Is one, they either try to fight the message, as you just said now, and so there's no movement, or two, they end up being like, yeah, well, I don't rape and I don't abuse and I try to listen to women, but all they do is complain and say, men this, men that, what am I supposed to do? Well, you're talking so much, you're talking so much over women that you're not even listening to what, women have been telling men what they must do. It's not like they haven't, they're just not doing it. So if you listen, you will hear what you need to do. If you listen, you will understand the solidarity that women are asking for. You just need to take a moment to, it's not even necessarily, I mean, yes, sitting with it, of course, but sometimes it's okay to move in silence, guys. It's okay to move in silence and just listen.
It's been so great chatting to you, Lou. I feel so like...
Right? I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having us.
Your passion.
Thank you. It really is my passion. You all, this whole thing really is my life. It really is. So thank you so much for having us.
No, I'm so excited for you and everything they're going to do in this world. And yeah, I just want everyone to visit your page and read everything and just, you know, be better moving forward. Just to close off, I would love to just keep talking to you because I just love all your thoughts and all your...
we should have a chat again. We'll have a chat again.
We should. Like, I think next time we should chat about like maybe 5 or 6 topics and really like get into it. I kind of came into this with a broad, like, you know, idea of what we're doing. I was just gonna try to cover everything, but I think there's too much, and I think maybe we should do more, or even one focused chat at a time.
Yeah, for sure. We'd love to do that again. Maybe I can have one of the other admins on with me next time as well.
Yeah, that would be amazing. But just to close off, I wanted to just give you a chance to let people know how to follow you, where to follow you, how to help. I know we spoke about your GoFundMe, what they can do, how they can get involved, like, and just you know, help you guys out with what you're doing.
So you should follow us on Instagram, Girls Against Depression. We are also now on TikTok, but so you should follow us there too. Yes, we're on TikTok as well. But follow our Instagram page. We have a lot of educational resources. You'll see that we also have guides. You'll see our highlights as well. Like our posts, read our posts, save our posts because we've been under a shadow ban for a while. Instagram doesn't really like it when we talk about intersectionality, so you know. But yeah, no. And people report our posts. The angry men report our posts a lot, but we prevail.
Okay, I'll remember that. Yeah.
So definitely, please do save our content. Yeah, because when you saving a post is like a super like. We have our fundraiser in our bio. Another thing that really helps is hotlines. We have a highlight that's just full of different hotlines in South Africa, not just for gender-based violence, mental health, children awareness, trafficking. We have all the hotlines, and share them because you never know who needs them. There have been times where I've shared resources off of our page on my personal account, and someone's been like, "Thank you, I really, really needed that." Just share as much like resources as you can need. We also have highlights from like the South African rights that show where you can get resources currently and here's funding for who. We also have guides that list all the centers that you can go to and that sort of thing. So if you want to get involved, even like with the fundraiser, if you can't donate, please still share it because you might share it to someone who can donate. So yeah, definitely give us a follow, guys.
Thank you so much for chatting to us, Lou. I hope to chat again soon.
All right, thank you so much. A pleasure. Keep well.
You too. Bye.
Bye.